Hello, everybody, and welcome to The Scares That Shaped Us, a podcast about horror writers and the stories that made them. I'm your host, Matthew Jackson, and today we are joined by a celebrated author, poet, editor, and teacher whose work includes the collection Las Criaturas and the new collection, The Remedy is the Disease, which is coming out this month. You can probably go get it right now. Leticia Urieta, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much, Matthew, for having me. I really appreciate it. I'm excited to be here.
It's my pleasure. It's great to meet you. Like I'm sort of surprised because we kind of run in the same region of
Yeah.
of the lit world that we haven't met, but it's always nice to have a fellow Texan on here. Like before we get going, like let's just talk Texas. Like where are you kind of based in Texas?
So it's funny. I was born in Austin,
Okay.
and I lived there, majority of my life. But my family is from all over Texas. My mom's side of the family's from like Waco, San Saba, all kind of Central Texas, and then my dad's side of the family is Mexican American folks from the Valley, from the Rio Grande Valley. So like that's why for me Tejana is kind of a chosen term
Yeah.
because that's where my roots are.
Yeah. So I grew up in Rosebud, which is one county south of Waco. So I'm from that sort of Waco Temple Killeen thing, and I should say, listeners, we have an Austin native on the show. Here in the Austin area, we joke that that's like finding a unicorn. We don't have
Hmm.
very many. Like I've lived in Austin for or in the area, I should say, because I technically live in Round Rock now. For over a decade, and I think I know one person who is a native.
Yeah, yeah, and
It's
it's tricky, right? Because it's like there's so many folks have left or moved or obviously been displaced, right? Like it's a challenging thing. I have a lot of love and sometimes a lot of hate for my city. And right now I'm actually not there. I'm traveling full time. We sold our house in Pflugerville and are traveling around the country. So yeah, it's interesting.
Well, since you brought it up, this was something I wanted to ask you about because you're known not just for your writing, you're known for your teaching. You are a teaching artist who has worked with Austin Batcave, which is a great
Right.
group here in the Austin area that helps writers of all ages develop their skills. You've done a lot of different teaching in this area, but you've also done teaching elsewhere, and now you sort of describe yourself as a traveling teacher. So, what is your sort of creative lifestyle like right now with that whole on the road vibe?
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, I I have so much love for Austin Batcave and Body Writers and like all of the organizations that I have worked for and with. Um, but yeah, last year just kind of started to feel like we needed a change, so we kind of uprooted our lives. And I've been, as we've been traveling from state to state, I have been trying to carve out a lot of time to really just write and focus on the writing. And so, trying to do that almost every day. And then I'm also like offering writing workshops. I've done some in person and some, and then a lot of virtual workshops for adults. Um, Especially now that I'm writing more horror, that's like something I'm focusing on offering too. So it's been really interesting. And then also just doing a lot of like mentoring and editing for folks, which is pretty cool. That's been really inspiring, actually.
So, this is a question that's come up a few times on the show. I've talked about it with Stephen Graham Jones. I've talked about it with Erica Worth. Is the kind of feedback that comes from being a writer and a teacher at the same time, how one feeds the other. And I know that your teaching is not like you're not in a university position like
Right.
they are, but you do have this life where you spend a lot of time teaching and mentoring, and then a lot of time writing your own work. What does teaching give your writing, and what does writing give your teaching?
Oh, I I love, I love teaching so much. I've been doing it for over a decade now. I started teaching elementary school and in Round Rock actually. And then I went to Texas State for my MFA program and was doing college age teaching. I've worked with adults. I've also done early childhood ed. So like I've always been really inspired by working with students and like I think when I'm able to focus on writing and creative writing, they especially even like younger teens or middle school students, like they really remind me that writing and creativity can be really unfettered. I think as we get older, sometimes, like, and if you start to publish work, there's a lot of pressure to um, make your work marketable, obviously to like maybe conform to a particular type of work that you think you should be putting out there. But when you work with youth and even just like folks who are starting out or who are kind of not really sure what they're doing, there's some insecurity there, but there's also like, for me, I get so much inspiration from them because like Austin Batcave, one of the anthologies that I was able to edit, that V Castro actually wrote an opening for, is our horror collection that we did, and like those kids went hard on those stories, and like that really kind of, and it was around the time I was writing The Remedy is the Disease, my new book, and like I was really inspired by them to like go in some of the weirdest directions. And so I think for me, the feedback is very circular and very much like reciprocal, in that we always have something to learn from one another, no matter what level of writing we're at. And yeah, I think that they often help me imagine bigger possibilities for my work.
So let's talk about The Remedy is the Disease a little bit. I
Okay,
really love this book. It is a
thank you.
collection. Would you say it's entirely body horror? I think all of the stories have some body horror flavor to them in some way or another.
So it's funny, my editors at Undertaker Books described it as like, it's like horror, it's dark fiction, it's speculative fiction, it's body horror. So it's like there are some works I think in it that are straddling a little bit more speculative, whereas like some of them are, pretty hard into like the body horror. But yeah, I think they all are dealing with the horrors of like being in a body and body autonomy, right?
Yeah,
That's kind of the focus.
yeah. Um, I'm pulling up your table of contents right now as we talk, so I apologize if there's any delay here. But one of the things I love about this collection is how much it feels. I feel like this is a very well paced collection, which is something I don't know that readers think about a lot, but I know that writers do who publish collections. Because reading this, you will get uh, a very short, very sort of impressionistic, almost tone poemy story that is maybe a page and a half, and then you will get a slightly longer, more deliberately narrative focused story that's maybe 5 pages, and then you'll get something even longer that almost feels novelette length, and then it'll cut back down to. So I love the pacing. I love the way that you give us these bite-sized things, and then these things that maybe take you 45 minutes to read, and it's really cool to kind of plunge into one and then sort of soak into another. What was the process like of putting this collection together and sort of understanding how you wanted those rhythms to work?
Yeah, I mean that's a good question, because in my first book, Las Criaturas, is poetry and prose, and
Hmm.
so like a lot of folks have told me like it was a fast read, but I had to sit with a lot of it for a while because of like some of the subject matter. And for this one, I think I wanted to kind of begin with like some of the weirder stuff that was ruminating on like what monstrousness is, like what our shadow selves look like. And then later in the collection, it's a little bit more of the emotional vulnerability in some of the stories, and exploring like the connections that people make even when they are feeling at their worst, or even like, dealing with suicidality, right? Or some of these other like aspects of trauma. And so um, I think that I wanted folks to be scared, discomforted, disgusted even in some instances, but also um, feeling like you're walking away from the collection towards the end with a feeling of like maybe being held in some way, if that makes sense, or like having an understanding of maybe like the experiences that I was putting into it, but also just the experiences of people who navigate chronic illness and all of these different things. So yeah, there is love there too. And I think that's the balance I was trying to strike.
There's a lot of I would say tenderness in some of these stories, and it's interesting that you sort of mentioned that balance because one of my favorite stories in the collection is a story called This Night World, which is about a researcher who goes out at night and records owl sounds in a wildlife preserve in Texas, and that is a story that combines that sort of auditor, like you even have a QR code there to listen. I'm not going to spoil the whole thing for readers, but it's a really interesting hybrid thing having this sort of uh, oral horror story that's also a Latinx folklore story that's also ends up being this very sort of tender, almost Clive Barkery kind of monster treatment. So just to get into your creative process a little bit, I wonder if you could tell us a little about the origin of that story.
Yeah, I have kind of an obsession with owls. I don't know if you can see it. My camera's a little
Oh
bit
yeah, there you
blurry,
go.
but yes. So this little owl statuette is from Curio Marvosa up in Taylor.
Mm.
And I love Elise and Alex's work. So if you get a chance, locals, go visit them. They're awesome.
I've been there. Yeah,
Um,
great store.
yeah, they're so kind and welcoming and super creepy fun. But anyway, but I've always loved owls, and in the last several years, like we had before we moved sold our house in Pflugerville, we our house backed up to a creek, and we had a pair of mated barred owls that would hunt in the creek. So we would take videos of them, hear them, I mean, almost every night for like a year. And my grandfather was a state officer for the Texas FFA. And if you know anything about the Texas FFA, their emblem is an owl, and they call their like newsletters the Owl Report. And so like owls were just kind of in my, I don't know, my purview, my mind at the time. And then I was thinking about some of the folklore that I wanted to maybe include in the story. The Lechusa came up, which is kind of a folk tale, you know, a witchy owl hybrid creature woman. And like, what would it look like to make that kind of like a queer telling, you know, and a fascination with some of that science. So I think those were the things that I was thinking about. And, you know, we're going to talk about the thing, but like one of the other things that I find recurring in a lot of my work is animal and like transformative body transformations. I think it's really interesting. So those were the things that kind of imbued this particular story. And then, yeah, when my editors were like, oh yeah, you could include a QR code recording of great horned owl calls, I was like, yes, yes.
It's a wonderful experience. But since you brought it up, yes, we are talking everybody. We're talking about one of the greatest horror films ever made on the show today. We're talking about John Carpenter's The Thing, released in 1982. Uh, I think probably the greatest. It's not my favorite Carpenter because I love Halloween so much that I will die with a copy of it in my arms. I'm sure, but I think it's probably his greatest technical achievement as a filmmaker. This film, um, and we're gonna spoil the whole movie. So if you haven't seen this 44-year-old classic, pause the movie. It's on Criterion Channel right now. So if you want to stream it on Criterion Channel, you can. But Leticia, I always like to start by asking about your first experience with this formative horror story. So, what do you remember about the first time you saw The Thing?
To be honest with you, I was thinking about this question because I can't actually remember when I first watched it. It feels like it's kind of just been in my life. Um, my my parents, you know, when I was younger, I was exposed to a lot of different horror films, whether I, you know, probably should have or not. Um, but I think it was revisiting this film and as an adult in I think it was maybe in the last like like in 2018 or something like that. And I just remember thinking like, what an incredible, obviously the body horror, but then like the impact that it had on me as far as some of the practical effects, the emotional like back and forth and weight of all these men, together like dealing with this, alien contagion almost. Um, so I wish I had a better answer for you because I don't have a particular memory of watching it when I was younger, but I do come back to it, and now I watch it. I try to watch it every single year because around winter time, because I do feel like it is one of those films that has had such an impact on my own work.
It is. You know what's funny is John Carpenter is my favorite horror filmmaker. I go back to Halloween all the time. I go back to Prince of Darkness all the time. I go back to The Fog a lot. The Fog is one of my comfort movies. The Thing, even though I love it and I'm very aware that I love it, I I hadn't watched it for probably a good 5 years until
Mm.
we were talking about doing this and you said The Thing and I went, "Oh great, this is an excuse to finally go back and rewatch The Thing." It is such a great, like, take away all of the awful gruesome things that happen to these people and it's kind of just a cool hangout movie about some dudes trying to solve a problem.
Yeah.
um it moves. It is almost 2 hours long and you don't feel it at all because the tension is so thick through it all. But for those who don't know, if you're somehow still listening to this and you don't know The Thing, we're going to talk about The Thing. The Thing is uh, based on a short story by John W. Campbell called Who Goes There? John W. Campbell Jr., I should say, which was adapted into a film in the 1950s by Howard Hawks called The Thing from Another World, which is one of the horror movies that the kids are watching on the TV in the original in Halloween. Howard Hawks was a huge influence on John Carpenter as a filmmaker, and so he took on this remake, which is basically just a group of American guys living in an Arctic research station who encounter an alien microorganism, or at least a some form of alien organism. It's never quite clear what the biological makeup of it is that is able to infect and assimilate them into its sort of hive mindy thing, and so it becomes this paranoid thriller as they all try to figure out who's infected and who's not. Um, but it's so much more than that.
Yes.
It's so much more. Uh, what do you what do you think jumped out at you most about this film? Because we can talk about all sorts of the characterization, the
Sure.
practical effects, the themes, the ambiguity of the ending. Uh,
Yeah.
what was the thing that kept you coming back to this movie?
Yeah, I mean, I think like you said, the tension is always climbing because even at the very beginning, and it's also not like super clear if they're like they're an American research group in Antarctica, but I think they're also like the military maybe. So there's like some weird stuff going on there. But it seems like they're kind of at a point where they're bracing for this like kind of blizzard to come, and so they're like already kind of at an emotional like low, where they're bracing for like having to hunker down even more than they already are. Tensions between them are already growing, and then you add this other like really scary piece that grows also, like for folks who have not seen it, there is like dog death, so just tread
Yeah,
lightly. That's always like the hardest part to watch, I think, sometimes. Just like kill all the people but spare the dogs, please. But I think for me, because I have a particular scene I want to talk about, but like because it is the scene that I think is well, there's actually two, but the scene that I love the most is kind of the blood testing scene. But like
hmm
I think the paranoia and the way that that folks who are supposed to be trusting one another as a team living together in this like very remote location, like it pulls all the strings of the things that they probably were already feeling about each other, maybe some distrust growing or just like frustration, and it pulls all those strings and like really untethers them from one another. And then like the inability to trust your own body and who you are, right? I think that is what continue, that, and of course like the incredible effects are what I keep coming back to with this film.
So one thing that I had sort of forgotten about the thing and the way that it opens is um it's there are a lot of homages to the Hawks film, the original Thing from Another World, embedded in it, and one is the use of a flying saucer as kind
Mm,
of the origin of this alien creature. And what's great is that's actually the first shot in the movie, which I had forgotten. The first shot in the movie is a flying saucer crash landing somewhere on Earth. It's just a wide shot from space. Flying saucer flies by, crashes on Earth. Title card goes up, and then we're off. And it's funny because it's obviously a tribute to what the original film did, and you get to see. There's even the moment where they go find the flying saucer and they sort of look
right.
at it from under the ice, um, and it makes you think for a minute that you're going to be watching a sort of conventional flying saucer alien invasion movie. You start thinking, okay, I think I probably got this. And then
Mm.
the next shot you see is this massive rock face. It's a beautiful shot. Dean Cundy, it was the cinematographer, shot the hell out of this movie. It's this beautiful shot of this gigantic rock face that looms up over the landscape like a monster, and a helicopter's coming over it, and the helicopter is chasing not an alien, not a crazy gray creature with a giant head, a dog. A husky is running across the snow. This helicopter is chasing it, and later, soon you find out this helicopter is also shooting at this dog, which is what kicks off this narrative. But I also want to go back to this movie is a masterclass in characters who are informed by their decision making, because we don't
Mm.
get any time to like hang out with these guys really. There's one scene and it's just they're all in like the rec room in their research station, and some of them are playing pool and some of them are playing cards, and
Some of them are smoking
McReady,
weed
some
and
are
trying to
smoking weed,
just chill.
they're getting drunk, they're smoking
Hmm.
weed, they're listening to music, and we meet Kurt Russell, who plays R.J. McReady, who is the station's helicopter pilot. He is not supposed to be the main authority figure at the station, but he's the coolest guy in the room. You can tell because it's Kurt Russell. And the first thing we see this dude do is he's playing chess. He's playing this computer chess game, and he loses the game, and his response to losing the game is to pull open the console and tip the rest of his scotch into the console and short out the computer, and he just says cheating bitch and gets up and leaves. And that's such an important moment because first of all it says so much about who he is as a character, but like you said, it doesn't seem like these guys are having a great time even before all
Right.
this other stuff. You get the sense of like they're very tired. They've been cooped up together for a long time. It's cold. You can't really do anything other than just hang out all day and get whatever work you need to get done. And so they're in no way prepared for any of what's about to happen to them. And to make things worse, the alien arrives in the form of a dog, which automatically they're like, "Why are you trying to kill this dog? It's just a dog." And we go from there. And I just sort of love the kind of almost awkward way that they get wrapped up in this, because there's no explanation of. I don't even know if we ever find out what they're doing at the station, do we?
No, it's very yada yada.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it's very just sort of gobbledygooked. Like, yeah, we're here,
yeah.
we do what we do.
Hmm.
And they have medical experts there and engineers and mechanics and all that stuff, but you don't really get a sense of what these guys are up to or what motivates them emotionally. You just get to watch them immediately thrown into this pressure cooker.
Yeah.
And it is a pressure cooker that does not stop for an hour and 45 minutes. Um, who is your favorite I should okay, let's phrase it
That's
this way.
hard.
Who's your favorite character other than McReady? Because everyone loves McReady.
And see, that's the thing. I don't particularly love McCready. I mean, I know that you're supposed to because it's Kurt Russell. He's got this like beard, he's doing, he's cool, right?
He's
But
got a
like,
leather jacket. Yeah.
yeah, he's the pilot. But he is like the asshole of the film. He is constant, as you said, like this response to losing the chess game is he destroys the computer. It was like, wow, okay, so I guess you're just not going to play chess for the rest of the time that you're here. I don't know, and so it's like we're supposed to see him as like somehow the level head or the leader, even though, yeah, like you said, he's not technically the ranking leader of this group. Um, and he does some things in the film that are like pretty questionable and not great a lot of the time, you know what I mean? So I don't know. I love Childs. I love, Keith David just as an actor like so much. And I kind of love him as the foil a lot of the time between
Yeah.
the two of them, and like obviously the film ends with the two of them just like literally staring each other down as the fires slowly wither in the rest of the camp. So I think that for me his character is the one that I feel the most connection to, just because I think he kind of pushes back and creates a lot of those moments. Blair is always really interesting too. He, again, does some pretty questionable things, but like, you do feel for a lot of them. And like, even when you were describing the opening, I always feel so bad for Clark because it's really interesting how the alien like immediately it's hiding in the body of a dog, how it knew to do that, but then like it immediately endears itself to Clark, who is like the caretaker of the base's dogs. I think that's really interesting, and it just makes me sad because I feel like his character probably gets infected like really, early on because of that. And then he has to, kill the rest of the dogs when they start getting assimilated. And I don't know. I feel bad for so many of these characters, but yeah, I do think that Childs is the one I come back to for that reason.
I don't even know if I could fully articulate why, but I like Windows a lot.
Mm,
Windows is the radio operator who wears
yeah,
sunglasses indoors all the time, probably for, pot reasons, drug reasons.
sure.
He's not the only like Norris, who is the geologist in the room. He is the one who's always talking about conspiracy theories and
Hmm.
crazy stuff like that. But Windows is just like this chill guy who's supposed to be manning a radio, and I find his particular brand of terror as he gets roped into this to be really interesting. But now that you mentioned the less likable qualities about McReady, I think we can talk a little bit about how this film is in the same way that another staple of 80s genre cinema, Predator, is. This movie is a critique of masculinity, of like
Mm,
what masculinity was in the late 70s, early 80s, but still is now, because it is about it. There are no women in the movie anywhere.
right.
Like women do not factor into the film at all, so you're just left to ponder these different kinds of men, and some are more sensitive than others, some have more of a temper than others, but they're all very much men. And it's a movie about what happens when you get a group of men in a confined space and start to take who they are away from them, and you find out what they have left. And McReady is, for basically the entire movie, the man's man.
Right.
He's the one who's like, well, we're going to burn it. We're going to blow it
Hmm.
up. We're going to shoot it. We're going to lock it in this room. we're gonna run these tests. I will tie every single one of you to a chair if I have to, but we are gonna solve this problem. And Carpenter just keeps taking resources away, just little by little. Every frame, which I should also mention, the script. This is one of the rare John Carpenter movies that was not written by John Carpenter. It was adapted by, excuse me, Bill Lancaster, uh, who was the son of Burt Lancaster, actually. But the script and the way Carpenter paces this out make it so, like, the first thing McReady loses is his helicopter, which is his whole deal. So he can't fly anywhere. And then the snowplow is also taken. They don't have the snowplow anymore. And then they have a scheme where they're going to test everyone's blood. They're going to test blood compared to the whole blood that they have in storage in the medical unit, just in case anybody needs blood. And then the blood is gone until by the end they're in an ice cave and everything's on fire and it's just splinters of wood around them and everything has been taken from him. Like anything that could help is gone. Civilization is destroyed around this man, and all he has left is like his tough guy sensibilities. I love that.
It's really interesting too, because if you think about the ending, it's almost like his the only thing he has left to is vindication, or like
Yeah.
the idea of like, I'm gonna wait this out, I'm gonna wait you out. But also we don't know, right? I know I watched a clip of Stephen Colbert, who I think was interviewing Kurt Russell, or maybe it was Keith David about this, and like that they both said that Carpenter like knew what the ending was, but he never, he didn't want to tell anybody about it. I just also think that it's funny that Stephen Colbert says this is his comfort movie. But yeah, I think you're so right that McCready, like, he's this like representation of hypermasculinity, and like resourcefulness, and then as every resource is taken away, the distrust grows, the animosity grows. I want to say more about that, and like what I, as a woman, as a woman, what that looks like for me, but I don't want to derail the conversation too much.
Oh no, no, absolutely go for it. That's why we're here.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, I'm not gonna like, as you were saying that, I'm not gonna like claim that if this film were all women, it would have played out completely differently, because I don't think that's realistic or real. Like paranoia and distrust and all of these things happen in all communities, right? But I do think that when they're like, as these resources are taken away and their means of survival are taken away, then it becomes this like, every man for himself essentially. And I think that a lot of times men like that are not used to having their autonomy taken away. They're not used to having their power taken away in so many instances. And like, I mean, by the end of it, the guy's threatening people with flamethrowers. Like it escalates very quickly, right? So it is a really interesting like commentary, I think, on especially when it's their own bodies that they can't trust. Like that's something that a lot of cisgender men may not like experience until later in their lives. And so that is another thing that I always find fascinating about his character, but about all of the characters in this film.
I do think that the most accurate thing in the film is that if the world ends and the only survivors are two men, they will spend the rest of their natural lives arguing over who is right. That is all that will happen. They will not try to look for survivors or anything else. They will just be like, "See, I told you. No, I told you. No, I'm going to be right. No, I'm going to prove." Um, talking about it from this angle, though, it's interesting. In my head, I was going back to Blair,
Mhm.
played by Wilford Brimley, and Blair is probably the most scientifically minded of any of these guys. Um, at least so he is a biologist. So he is the
Right.
guy they are trusting to like explain what's happening because basically what happens is that the helicopter with the helicopter chasing the dog is from a nearby research station that's run by Norwegian scientists, and they try to tell the Americans like we have to kill this dog, we have to kill this dog. The Americans don't understand. Both Norwegians end up dead, and then there's just this dog. um and while they're trying to figure out what's going on, they put the dog in the kennel with the other dogs. uh and the dog does what the thing does, which is just basically spout all these weird, veiny tentacles and start attacking and assimilating all of the other living things in its orbit. Um, and so they rely on Blair. They're like, dude, what is happening? Can you figure this out? Because we can't. And he does his creepy autopsy scene,
Oh my gosh.
and
Yeah.
then he runs a computer simulation, and he basically determines like whatever this thing is, it will take over the entire planet if we let it. um there is no stopping it, basically. And that affects him so much that his only response is to go, all right, well, I have to save the planet, and the only way I can save the planet is to completely isolate us here and let us all die, because that's all we can do. If we let it get out, it will. We none of us can ever go back to the mainland ever again. That's it. And so he starts smashing up the radios because he doesn't want anybody calling. He starts smashing up the he smashes up the helicopter. He smashes up the snowplow, and they're all like, "What are you doing? You're crazy." And of course, it turns out at the end that he was infected, and so
Mm.
part of that was just trying to keep it so that they couldn't escape uh, getting assimilated. But what's funny is that their response to him doing that is to lock him in the storage shed outside. They board up the windows and lock him in and dose him with morphine so he'll be sedated and he won't try to fight them too hard. And then by the end, they all end up doing the same stuff that he was doing because they've all fallen victim to the paranoia grips them as much as the alien does, which I love, and I love how Carpenter portrays all of that, and it builds, of course, to the scene that you mentioned that you said was one of your favorite scenes. So I guess we can talk about it, which is the blood testing scene, which is
Yes. Although I do want to say, just like there is comedy in this film. It's
oh
not, I don't think
yeah,
it's always meant to be comedic, but like there's a part where they go check on Blair when he's in the storage shed and he's like, I'm fine now. Noose, there's a noose he's created just hanging from the ceiling. He's like, I'm ready to come back inside. I'm fine now. And it's not addressed at all. I don't know. That just it
it
always cracks me up every time I see that film. But
it is it is a funny movie because it is like I love horror films like this that understand that in a situation that is completely unprecedented for any of the people involved, there is no normal way to behave. Like
mm-hmm.
aliens is like that too. Aliens is very funny. Even though like they're all getting attacked by monsters and they're all going to die. It's funny because it's just like, well, what can you do except like have your moment of levity while the world is ending? Uh,
Right.
so yeah, there is a thread of humor, and it all culminates, of course, in that moment when the thing takes a human head and spouts legs like a spider and crawls
Yes.
away, and Norris just looks back at it and goes, "You got to be fucking kidding me," which
Exactly.
is one of the great lines in any horror film. But
Yeah.
the blood testing scene, and
Yes.
we're skipping around on the plot because again, we're assuming that y'all know this movie, but it is one of the most tense scenes in film history, and it comes on the heels. I had not remembered the exact sequence of events here. It comes on the heels of everyone else in the station thinking that McCready might be the thing because they find
Yeah.
some of his clothes ripped up and burned. And So they're like, it's you. Like you clearly like shapeshifted out of these clothes, and that's why you're running around trying to tell us what to do. And he literally he's like, I will blow us all up. They find him, they pull him out of a room, and he's got the flamethrower and he's got some dynamite. And he goes, we will all die if you don't let me do what I want to do. And they all just kind
Hmm.
of have to go, sure, what sure. And so his plan is to tie several of his station mates to chairs, draw their blood very unscientifically, by the way, because he just like he just cuts their fingers with a scalpel and takes blood. Um, and then like he has a hot wire, and he's gonna stick the wire into each petri
Hmm.
dish of blood, and that's how you'll know because this thing he realizes after oh god, who's the guy that dies? Who's
Oh,
the
there's,
guy
well,
that
yeah, I'm trying to
um
think of, well, I guess it's Clark. Clark dies because, well, he shoots Clark in the head at one point.
he shoots Clark in the head, but who is what is the character who gets
Oh,
defibrillated?
Benny. Oh no, I'm sorry, that's Norris.
It's is it Norris?
Who gets defibrillated, yes. But I think it's
Okay.
Bennings who
I've been
dies
I've been
before that.
I've been saying the wrong guy. I was thinking of Knowles. When I
Oh
was
yeah.
saying Norris before. You're right. Norris, who is the geologist of the group, has a heart attack while McCready is threatening to blow everyone up. And uh, so they defibrillate him, and then the doc dies, and all this other stuff.
Yes.
But McCready gets the idea from watching all of that happen that like each individual cell of this thing can be its own free thinking organism. So if I try to burn the blood, it will try to defend itself. Um, and it's such a beautiful misdirect because everything about the circumstance of the scene has led you to believe that Gary, who is the commander of the station, is the thing. Everything about his behavior, everything about his resistance to the idea has led you to believe, like, oh yeah, that guy's going to turn into a monster right now. And then, of course, it's not him. It's Palmer who starts turning into a monster right in front of them. Uh, but that's almost beside the point. The point is this moment where everyone is nearly completely silent except McReady, who is naming off people as he tests their blood. Um, I still remember where I was the first time I watched that scene. I was
Oh
in my,
wow.
my I was in my buddy Lance's bedroom in Marlin, Texas, probably 2003. Um, he had just bought the movie on DVD and was like, "You got to see this movie. This is fucking crazy," and it is. But that scene is the scene that clues you into. I think when the thing gets passed around a lot among young horror fans who are just discovering the big movies, it gets passed around as Rob Bottin. Rob Bottin did these amazing effects. You won't
Mm.
believe how the monsters look in this thing. You gotta watch it. You gotta watch it. And yeah, you get the spider head. You get the weird dog creature. You get the almost like plant like Venus flytrap head that comes out and grabs
Yes. Oh my
grabs
gosh.
windows. You get all those things, but it's all about that scene, the blood testing scene.
Yeah.
So I just want to give you an opportunity to talk about like what that scene means to you, why it hits you so hard.
So, um, I think I come back to that one too because, like, you asked me about my favorite character, and Keith David's character, Childs, is not by any means perfect, but I think like it's interesting the way you described how this is like the realization that the thing, the alien being, can exist on both like a macro and a micro level, and that its drive is to survive at all costs, right? And I think that the kind of metaphor there is that McCready is that way, as much as he would like to think that he's human, and he says that more than one time. He's like, I know I'm human, I know I'm still me, right? This like kind of focus on like hyper individual, like I'm me, and he says that like during that scene in particular a couple of times. But he's like, well, I don't know about the rest of you. And so it's funny because he kind of represents, and I think that you see this a lot in like, especially in this era of like, this is a horror film, but like you could also say that it is his character is very like kind of 80s action dude, right? Um, and that person is like, the rogue survivor kind of, even like in Predator, like the one who's gonna almost like the final girl, I guess, if you want to say it, but like not in a good way. Whereas then like Childs at one point, when they test when I think it's Clark's blood, he's like, oh, so Clark was human and you just straight up murdered him. Like there's like trying to hold the accountability, and the rest of them seem to be trying to like maintain a level of humanity and like collective good. Um, but I just think it's funny that the film almost like pushes the viewer to see McCready as the one who is like making the reasonable decisions. But maybe that's not what the film is doing. I don't know. So anyway, that particular scene always like sticks with me. And um there's an essay in my book that I referenced this scene that I wrote like a few years ago, because I think it is also a really interesting metaphor for folks who have struggled with their bodies, where it's like, if you're thinking about it from a body horror perspective, um, the inability to know what's wrong with you or what's going on in your body, the feeling of being infected in some way, like all these different things come to a head and grow that fear to the point where like the community fractures, right? And so I think that is why that particular scene sticks with me, because it is so layered and just really interesting. And then like, shit hits the fan over and over again.
Yeah, I think the simplified version of what the film is doing is very much it's showing these guys whose humanity is slowly stripped away, and obviously some go much quicker than others. Uh, so they become less human over time, even if they are still biologically human. But another thing, the way you talked about that as a body horror film, the thing that scares me about the body horror in The Thing is uh contrast it with a while back we had Clay McLeod Chapman on. We talked about Philip Kaufman's adaptation of Invasion of the Body Snatchers from the 70s. That film is much more quiet with the way that its body horror works, but it's dealing with the same themes. But what scares me a lot about the body horror in The Thing is these guys are infected and they don't seem to actually know it in every case. Like Blair obviously knows it in some form, because by the end, Blair has scavenged parts from all over the station and is trying to build a little spaceship
Right.
in the tunnels underneath the buildings. Uh, so there is an awareness, I think, but especially in the blood testing scene, you get the sense that everyone in that room thinks, I know who I am. I am a human being. I am trying to survive. This is crazy. I know it's not me. And then, of course, when it actually happens, when Palmer's blood lights up, it it ticks a particular fear I have, which is the idea of the body as a time bomb. The idea that all of us could be walking around feeling perfectly normal, feeling like we know everything that's going on with us, we know who we are, what we are, and some biological process could happen in our body, whether that is an aneurysm or a stroke or a heart attack or some other thing. Someone in my extended family didn't know they had cancer until their leg broke, which
Wow.
if cancer gets into your bones, it can do that. Suddenly your bones just come apart. um that's the kind of thing that freaks me out. The idea that like I could go to the doctor and get checked up and they might go, hey, your heart's a little weird, maybe let's look at that. But I could also just walk outside tomorrow and just fall down and that would be it. And The Thing does such a great job of playing with that particular wrinkle in body horror that really freaks me out. But before we start to wrap this up, you mentioned two scenes that are
Hmm.
really important to you. The blood testing scene, but I also want to ask what's the other one?
Besides the ending, which I think is I love an ambiguous ending. There's so many endings like that. But I do think that this one in particular is one of my favorite ambiguous endings. But I do like the defibrillator scene as well, because again, it's like even with this scene where they're testing the blood, and there's a part where, oh gosh, what is this character's name? It's Gary, right? Gary, who is like the prime suspect, as you mentioned. He's like, this is pure. I don't know why this sticks in my head, but like, this is pure poppycock. Something about the way he says that always makes me chuckle. Um, but then the minute that Palmer starts transforming and they're like tied to the bench with him, he's like he's like, burn him. So the communal the care for one another goes out the window like really fast. Um and I think too, like the defibrillator scene from a perspective of like the effects is obviously very cool, but it is also that feeling of like, I'm trying to help this person, I'm trying to save this man's life. And all of a sudden, I mean, like if you're just seeing that film for the first time, I remember feeling that way, where it's like, I don't think that anybody could have predicted that his chest was just going to open up like a mouth and bite off the doctor's hands. You know what I mean? The unexpected like effect of that, but also just the way um that these men are trying to like care for one another in many ways, and that gets undermined over and over again. I don't know. I don't really know that I have anything like super profound to say about it, but I just think it's a really interesting ramping up of that tension over and over again. And then of course his head comes off and becomes a spider, and we see that in like the homage to that in the newer It film as well. And so it's clearly something that is indelible. It stays in our brains.
Yeah, I mean that is the scene that I took away. I think the first time when they defibrillate Norris, that was the thing that was in my head every night going to sleep for a week. Uh, Even more than that's the same scene where Norris's head sprouts legs and walks away, or tries to walk away. They burn it with the flamethrower, but um, yeah, it's such a, in my mind, and I say this even though I literally watched the film less than 24 hours ago. In my mind, when that defibrillator goes through that chest cavity, and uh, you get that brief glimpse inside before the chompers come down. It looks like it goes on forever. It looks like it could be. It
Yeah.
looks like a well just going all the way down. Uh, but you mentioned the ending, and this is something that, as a journalist who works in the horror field, it comes up a lot. Every once in a while, there's a new documentary called The Thing Expanded that's coming out this month that digs deep into all aspects of the movie's production. Um, Produced by my buddy Josh Weiss. Shout out to Josh. But So that's happening. But every time that John Carpenter comes out and does another round of interviews, anytime like Keith David on a talk
Mhm.
show, Kurt Russell on a talk show, if you run into a Thing fan, someone wants to ask, what does the ending mean? It's very similar to Ridley Scott being asked about whether or not Deckard is a replicant for the same span of time, because Blade Runner and The Thing came out in the same year. And I'm with you. Like, I do not actually care who is the Thing, if it's McCready, if it's Childs, if it's both of them, if it's neither of them. I don't actually care. I like that scene because it is these two men just acknowledging that they're done. Just understanding that whatever is going to happen next, they are completely cooked, and they may as well just sit here and get drunk while the world ends. Um, it is a remarkable way to end a movie like that, especially in 1982. Especially when, when I think about what John Carpenter was known for up to that point, Halloween, where there's a very clear final girl survivor, Escape from New York, where it's a little more like Snake Plissken is not uh is more anti-hero than hero, but there's
Sure.
still like we're rooting for this guy. We want this guy to
Hmm.
make it out. Um, and then even thinking about something like Alien that came out 3 years earlier that could have had a much darker ending and instead ends with Ripley making it out through that escape pod and killing the xenomorph. We're talking about unexpected things, like the idea that a movie this intense, a movie with this many face melting, literal face melting sequences
Right.
in it would end on this quiet, like, we're just going to sit here and listen to the wind howl at the end of the world. It still feels almost revolutionary to me.
Yeah. It's also really interesting now that we're talking about it because I think in a lot of these kinds of films, especially if there's like the isolationism of Antarctica, right? Like that like is doing a lot with this particular film. And like I think we see that in a lot of other films as well, but like that are taking place in like a very remote location. But I think it's also them contending with like, I'm not just giving up or like kind of seeing what happens, right? Because I know that I won't survive this. The likelihood of either of them surviving the cold, or one another or what have you, and wanting to be right, wanting to be vindicated. But it's also like their humanity has been stripped away to the point where like, how would you have a life after this, even if you were to survive and make it out of this? Like what you have done has stripped away every part of who you ever maybe thought you were, right? And I think that's also the piece of it that kind of Blair was trying to, do, is like that self-sacrificing piece. Whereas with these two characters, it's much more like, well, I guess this is it, you know what I mean? So um yeah, that humanity being stripped away in so many different levels, that it's a dark ending for sure, but I do love it. I love the way that they're just staring each other down at the end.
Yeah, it's amazing. So we're nearing the end of our conversation, so I want to be sure to bring it back around to the mission statement of this show, uh, and ask you. We've talked about it already a little bit with the ways that you incorporate body horror into your work and the things about body horror that are important to you. But I just want to ask directly, how has the thing affected your imagination and your work as a writer?
I mean, I think it's, I've watched this film with like my sisters, and like younger folks, and um it's interesting watching it intergenerationally, and also like with my parents. And I think some younger folks might, even younger horror fans who are used to, because there was a prequel that was made, I think in what, 2018, 2019. You're not supposed to really know that it's a prequel, but it's like an imagining of the origin of the thing, or like its discovery. Um, and that one is definitely much more, CGI, and yeah, just much more, I guess, connected to like what we would, normally expect to see from a modern movie. Whereas this one, I think there's something about the practical effects that like others might find cheesy, but I just think are so interesting and like really shaped my understanding of like how you can be like surprisingly scary with the chest opening, right? How you can, um, be like very uncomfortable and gross and like dig into that. And like being in a body is often gross and absurd. And there are moments of absurdity in this film. And I think that like really, again, opened my understanding of like how you could really dive deep into that. And then for me, it's about taking that and then imbuing it in my like real lived experiences, with navigating like body trauma or medical trauma or all these different aspects of that. So yeah, I just think that this film has a lasting effect on so many levels. But for me, that's it opened up a lot of possibilities, kind of like Norris's chest opening and eating the doctor's hands.
So what we're saying here is, if you want the feeling in your own life of your hands plunging down into a flesh chasm and then having them chopped off below the elbow by giant teeth, you should buy The Remedy is the Disease, a new collection by Leticia Urieta, which is available now wherever you get. Where can we find it? Undertaker, what's the press's name?
Undertaker Books. You can buy it directly from them. For indie authors, it's also super helpful wherever you are to order it from your local independent bookstores. That tells the bookstores that people want it. Request it from your local library. Like, those are all great ways. I try not to plug Amazon because, I think for obvious reasons. So, but yeah, I think that wherever you get it, get a copy for another horror loving friend. But yeah, that the way you describe that is like I want to put that on the book as a blurb, because I couldn't imagine a better tagline.
Well, I'm glad I could help. But yes, everyone go pick up the collection. It's fantastic. Leticia, it's been great talking to you. Before we let you go, will you let everyone know where they can find you online?
Yeah, so the best way to find me is on my website. I have a monthly newsletter where I talk about my work, and provide like reading lists and other resources for writers. So it's leticiaurieta.com. I'm on Instagram and on Blue Sky, and that's kind of the extent of most of my social medias. If I didn't need to be on any social media, I wouldn't, but there we are. So yeah,
life of a writer. Yeah,
yeah.
everyone go follow Leticia. Everyone get the book. Leticia, it was so great talking to you about The Thing. Thanks so much for being on the show.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks once again to Leticia Urieta for being on the show. Her book, The Remedy is the Disease, is available right now. Go pick it up. It's fantastic. And be sure to follow Leticia on all of her socials so you can keep track of everything she has going on. And if you want to keep track of everything we have going on, the easiest way to do that is to follow us on Blue Sky. We are at scareshapedus.bsky.social over there. Head over there. You will find every new episode of the show, new guest announcements, giveaways whenever we do giveaways, whatever else is on my mind. We are also on Facebook. We are The Scares That Shaped Us over there. If you want to give us a follow, we are also The Scares That Shaped Us on YouTube. If you prefer to get your podcast that way, you can head over there, like, subscribe. You will get every new episode right on your YouTube account. We appreciate the support. If you enjoy the show, please do us a favor and tell your friends about it. And if you are so inclined, head over to the podcasting platform of your choice and leave us a 5-star review. That helps us tremendously to build our audience. And we appreciate any shares and support that you can give us. But that in particular is a big thing with podcasts to help us grow. We will be back next week with another brand new episode of The Scares That Shaped Us. That's it for me this week. Until next time, take care of yourselves, take care of each other. I'm Matthew Jackson, and this is The Scares That Shaped Us.